It is almost 90 degrees and rising up here in my office, according to my window fan, but it kind of sets the vibe for what I'm talking about today because it kind of reminds me of being at a show. But since this is introverted music guy and not shirtless music guy, I'm just going to stop bitching and proceed with the topic at hand. I figured I'd wear this shirt for the video. It's probably the only one that's seen a lot of action from all the mosh pits I've been in for the last 25, 30 years. This it's an OG, man. It deserves respect. Mr. Torrance and I, we've been through a lot of shit together and times worn some holes in it here and there and a couple spots and the sleeves are all frayed. But anyway, I'm back for more nonsense and I wanted to do a complete or as complete as I could dig up history of the mosh pit and figure out how, when, and where the hell did it start. What inspired this all was I was recently thinking about the last few times that I saw Slayer. I saw them at MSG in New York City back in 2019, but I've actually seen them a couple dozen times over the decades. And I remember being in the crowd during some of their shows, like in the mid 2010s, thinking, man, the pits have calmed down from what I remember. I should never feel completely safe and relaxed being on the outskirts of a mosh pit at a Slayer show. One night at a show in 2015, I was actually more surprised at the lack of fights. And yeah, you could say a Slayer and many older bands I go to see, they attract the older crowds, but there are plenty of teens and 20 somethings in the pit. And it seems like they were a bit more polite and chill than my generation was, at least at that time. I know we Gen Xers were a different breed, especially back in the 80s and 90s when a lot of this craziness started taking off. Let me tell you a story first. I saw Slayer for the first time back in 95 at the Roseland in New York City, and it was just me and my friend Chris. It was the third concert for me, and it was our third show together, but it was his fourth concert because his first show was when his mommy took him to see Michael Jackson when he was a kid in the 80s. Yeah, we broke his balls about that incessantly when we were kids, but anyway, I remember just standing in line, waiting for the door to open, and we were both a bit on edge, to say the least. We'd always heard how rough Slayer pits were, and this show also had Machine Head and Biohazard opening, so we didn't know what the fuck to expect. A lot of dudes who were in line there looked like they came there to fight, like these faces you could strike a match on. And Chris and I were these two Beavis and Butthead looking rejects at 160 pounds apiece, and we had no backup with us, and we were far from what you would consider tough dudes. Well, we made it through Machine Head and Biohazard fine, although the pit during Biohazard was pretty damn rough. Now, being in the crowd in the moments before Slayer went on, the place was like it is in here. It was a sauna, just several thousand compressed bodies, all of them struggling for space and barely gaining an inch. You could practically taste the tension like a radioactive mist. All these sweaty guys in band shirts, and some of them not in shirts, just pressed up against you, and you just had to deal. You'd smell and feel the steamy alcohol breath on the back of your neck from the dudes behind you, and the crowd squashing you from every angle. And yeah, it was mostly dudes. Not a lot of girls at a Slayer show back in 95. Out in the distant darkness somewhere, you'd hear someone, scream the occasional primal scream of Slayer! Then Ozzy's song Diary of a Madman starts playing as the band's music and doubling as a countdown to showtime. And everybody around me is just rotting with anticipation. Some of them look like they were gearing themselves up as if they were heading into a UFC octagon. At the front and center of the stage, it just felt like being in the center of a ticking bomb, and probably not the best place for Chris and I to be, but we wanted to be in the shit. This was our first Slayer experience, and we're going to do this. We're going to do it right, not just hiding in the back like a couple of pussies. At the time, I knew the song Diary of a Madman, so I knew when we were down to about the last 30 seconds of it, and I could just feel the compression just getting tighter and squeezing the hell out of me. And I was like, okay, this is it.
Buckle up, fucklehead.
You ready, motherfucker? Because there's no turning back now.
Now you just can't leave.
The excitement and impatience of the audience was just ready to boil over and explode. Like, come on, let's go. Then finally, Ozzy's done. The lights dim, and it's quiet for a brief moment. And then the intro for Raining Blood starts. And while that's playing, a couple moments into it, I'm starting to lose my 19-year-old mind because I see Kerry and Jeff and Tom and Dave, emerging through the stage fog. Once the intro is done, when that song kicks into high gear a few moments later, and Slayer fans know what the hell I'm talking about. When I tell you that place seismically shifted, I mean, it was wall to wall. At the start, there was no room at all for a circle pit or a mosh pit, so the entire crowd would just be pushing each other and shifting uniformly from the left of the stage to the middle, to the right, back to the middle again, in just one big mass. It's like tectonic plates banging into each other. I'm surprised the whole goddamn building didn't move. And my friend Chris, yeah, he was gone. See you, dude. Best of luck to you. I hope I find you one piece later so we don't have to send an officer to inform your mother you didn't make it, because I think I spent the first minute fighting like hell to survive with my feet just constantly trying to stay planted on the ground. I spent almost a minute or two just suspended in midair by the compression of bodies jammed up all around me, just struggling to remain upright because I remember thinking, if I fall, I am dead. The staff's going to be sweeping up later and find me flattened out like Wile E. Coyote. There were fights breaking out quite a lot, and throughout the show, I'd see people emerge from the pit with bloody, battered faces, people with ripped shirts looking like they've been through a rumble. I don't think I saw Chris again until maybe 3 or 4 songs later when things calmed down just a little bit, but we had a fucking blast. From the moment the band took the stage, I don't even think I got a glimpse of them again until maybe the second or third song, because I had to keep my head on a swivel constantly and watch all the people around me so I didn't get sucker punched or smashed into. But you know what? I loved every fucking minute of it. I know I'm kind of painting a picture here like, it was a war zone, like where the troops storming Omaha Beach in 44, but you can look through the comment section and others who were there will confirm that it was fucking chaos. Slayer always brings out the animals.
Release the Slayer fans.
And that's how most Slayer shows I went to were up until maybe the late 2000s and 2010s. But I can honestly look back and say I survived Slayer in 95. To all the people who were just kind of like looking down from the mezzanine at the 95 show, I'd compare it to, like, you ever see those videos taken by tourists from the safety of a second or third floor balcony as they're watching a tsunami go by? Yeah, that's probably how it was. It was rough. And kids, there was no safe space back then, at least not on the floor, maybe in the bathroom if you wanted to hang out. But that's how pits were back then. And you could just be chilling on the sidelines of the pit, minding your own damn business, being careful and watching the band, and just get absorbed into the chaos like the Blob. It wasn't unusual to see fights all the time, people needing medical attention, dudes getting carried out, ambulances parked out front. I hear from old school guys once in a while, older than I am, that is, that shit was even crazier back in the late 70s and early to mid 80s. Say what you want about boomers, man, but they could fuck shit up back then. It wasn't only fights you had to watch out for too. You had to be careful if you were close to the stage, because stage divers sometimes they would do a flip in midair, and when they landed on you, it could be right on your head. Or sometimes you'd get both their Doc Martens right to the face. You had to keep your head on a constant swivel, because if you were on the floor near the stage, there was a likelihood that someone could just wreck your night, and not even just the stage divers, mind you. Back in the late 90s, I was at a Merciful Fate show at Birch Hill, and I was near the front, of course, my crazy ass, facing the stage, and I had all 170 pounds of a crowd surfer come from behind me and land right on top of my head, and it sucked. I had to sit out the rest of the show in the back, holding my neck and whining like a little girl that I'm dying.
Oh, poor baby.
I think I still have neck issues from that. What's crazy too is that band members weren't even immune to injury at a lot of these club shows. It wasn't uncommon as the lead singer to have a microphone smack right into your goddamn teeth because some clumsy ass stage diver stumbled his drunk ass into the mic stand. And guitarists weren't off the hook either. Sometimes they'd be concentrating in the middle of a solo and just get body checked out of nowhere because some asswipe tripped on an instrument cable. And going back even further, there were times in the early days of punk when the audience and the bands performing had to worry about cops coming in and cracking heads. I know the band Black Flag had multiple run ins with the LAPD back in 1980. That in itself I think, is a whole other saga worth looking into. Things could get exceptionally violent way back in the 80s when going to see a band that drew a diverse audience. And I'm not referring to race or gender here. You kids are very lucky today that today's concerts are much more inclusive as far as crowds go because like everybody in attendance to see Slayer or Pantera or Machine Head, they all fit under one nice little umbrella. Like we're all fans here, dude. You fall down in the pit, hey, I got you, bro. They'll just, kind of dust you off and push you back out there, like, go get him, champ. But back in the 80s and 90s, yeah, things were a little bit different. Certain thrash bands that had a particular type of fan base, like Exodus, Testament, Metallica, Overkill, with dudes that had long hair and high top sneakers and tight jeans. And then you had these crossover bands, bands that they weren't thrash metal, they weren't punk, they were hardcore or somewhere in the middle there. Bands like DRI, Suicidal Tendencies, the Crumbsuckers, Cro-Mags, Agnostic Front, SOD. These bands attracted the long-haired metalheads, the hardcore guys, punks, skater punks, skinheads, rednecks, Nazi punks. And when you mix them all in this dark alcohol-fueled cauldron, things could and would get ugly and tribal pretty fast. If you had the balls to show up, even in the 90s, wearing something funny and cute, like dressed like a hipster in a fedora or something silly like that, yeah, you were just begging to get your ass handed to you. Look, I can admit not everything about the good old days was all good. Ugh. God damn, man. All right. So, what do you want to do in the pit? I mean, pretty much anything goes, at least that's the way I see it. Act a fool. Whatever you want to call this chaos at shows, it does have several names. Some call it slam dancing or thrashing, moshing. But whatever you want to call it, you can either do your own thing or you can just participate and be part of the collective mass chaos. You got circle pits, the wall of death, that's some crazy batshit Braveheart battle type shit there. You got crowd surfing, stage diving, which can be very dangerous, obviously. And you got to make a split decision sometimes before you're jumping into the crowd because sometimes the second you jump, the people that were there a split second ago might not be there when you land. The sea parts and you are going to be hurting like hell tomorrow. I seen that shit happen several times. I remember being at a show. We were at the Limelight in New York City back in '94 to see it was Napalm Death, Obituary, and Machine Head. And I saw this dude jump from the stage and he misjudged. And I couldn't see him hit the floor from where I was standing about 20 feet away. But my feet felt the thump in the hardwood floor under me when he landed. I felt so bad for that dude, man. I guess he made it out. I have no idea. Aside from all that kind of stuff, like if you want to go rogue and do your own thing, you can do the two-step, windmilling, the gorilla, picking up change. Hell, you can junk, jive, and wail if you want to get adventurous, but you might get knocked on your ass, though, trying that one. You can even throw your heritage in there in the mix and just get cultural with some kind of crazy dancing. You might get some weird looks, but hey, pretty much nothing is off the table. Go nuts. You can also stand there like a statue and just headbang and do nothing.
Excuse me, is Greg here? Thank you.
I mean, pretty much anything goes. Just be careful doing it for yourself and others' sakes. I think sometime in the 2000s, it got really popular to start going all Bruce Lee with windmill kicking and kung fu moves. And a new thing I've seen in crowds over the last couple of years is people rowing. Like rowing. I'm not kidding. Check this out. I mean, I won't piss on it. Motherfucker, you want to get your workout in while enjoying the show. I mean, whatever. You do you, boo. But I think that started at shows for the band Amon Amarth, which is this Swedish Viking metal. So once you know that, you kind of got a history of what it's all about. But I've seen it happen in other bands' shows too. So I guess it's just a thing now. Now, don't get me wrong. Not every mosh pit back then was full of violent savages looking to bloody someone's face. There was and still is pit etiquette. Pick people up when they fall. Don't go kicking someone when they're down. Don't be an asshole. Don't just drag someone in the pit if they're just chilling on the sidelines and they don't want to go. Just leave them be. No punching, kicking, or fighting, but obviously not everybody knows how to obey that rule. I mean, you mix alcohol in with a bunch of aggressive, sweaty animals and violent music, there's going to be problems occasionally. Also, don't be a perv. You know who you are out there. Leave the ladies be. If they're moshing or crowd surfing, that does not give you the right to just reach out and cop a feel whenever you feel like it. Have a little fucking class. Will you help the ladies out and be a gentleman? Fucking degenerates. There are some rules and standards. It's really about having fun and letting off steam, but as we all know, not everyone knows how to behave. I mean, that's life. What the hell can you do? So mosh pits had to start somewhere. I mean, the general consensus is that it started at punk shows in the very late 70s or early 80s. And it took a few years, I guess, to get to metal audiences. In this clip, you can see Slayer performing one of their first shows. I mean, were they opening for Flock of Seagulls that night? I mean, aside from one dude shaking his fist aggressively, no one knows what the hell to do in there. They're all just kind of standing there like... So who the hell started such a crazy ass trend? I mean, everything has a beginning, right? So they say. Well, finding that beginning, of course, it's never easy. Nothing is ever cut and dry ever. Like you hope there's some government building somewhere that you can visit and dig through some basement filing cabinet and pull out an official document that says, yes, this is the guy who started it. This is the band who started it. This is the date it started. Every region has their own interpretation on who or where and when the hell it first started, but the collective consensus seems to be that the grassroots of what we call moshing today, it all goes back to London in the late 70s.
London.
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 London?
Yes, London. Fish, chips, cup of tea, bad food, worse weather, Mary fucking Poppins, London.
It's all very confusing. I don't know exactly what to believe, but let's dive right in, so to speak, and figure this shit out. Okay, according to some sources, we got to start with pogoing. Now, pogoing was the predecessor to mosh pits, where you just jump up and down in place. Pretty simple. It sure didn't take a genius to come up with that move. I mean, no, it really didn't. Supposedly a dude named Simon John Ritchie, who you all know as Sid Vicious, bassist for the Sex Pistols, he claimed to have invented that.
Yeah, I started it because I hated the Bromley contingent, and I invented a dance that would involve being able to knock them all over the fucking 100 Club. So I just used to throw myself about, leap up like horizontal and sideways, just like boing, 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 boing. like land on them and smash them into the floor.
And there are some fellow artists like Shane MacGowan from the Pogues and Steve Severin from Susie and the Banshees. They have stories that kind of slightly differ from Sid's account of how it was invented, but they vouch for him starting it. But some sources say that it was started at a Sex Pistols show back in 76, but by the crowd. When the Pistols played the 100 Club in London, supposedly it was just packed to capacity with 350 people. And due to the layout of the place, no one could see the band well. So people just started jumping up and down over and over to catch a glimpse of Sid fucking up his bass lines or falling over drunk as usual. And a trend was born. Pogoing over time became a thing at punk shows in England, and as it gained popularity, it really started to piss off club owners, like these kids today. And the club owners or security would have you ejected for doing it. Like, you can do traditional dancing, but don't be a menace. How lame is that? And it wasn't just in England that this would happen. Here's something I didn't know. As pogoing spread, it made its way to Canada, and apparently their club owners hated it too. And one guy who kept getting thrown out on his ass a lot, and I'm going to screw up his name probably, Ivan Doroschuk. Well, he's the lead singer of the band Men Without Hats. And if you ever wondered what in the hell that song, The Safety Dance, is about, there's your answer. So anyway, Sid is at least credited with being involved with bringing pogoing to punk shows, but I'm sure like anything else, someone else did it first somewhere, but I can't confirm that. When you think about it, it's such a simple concept, especially for people in the audiences who can't dance. So it's possible it appeared at concerts in the 60s or the early 70s in certain parts of the world, but Sid is credited with bringing it to punk shows in some way, shape, or form. But the question is, eventually, people got tired of just doing pogoing at punk shows, and moshing came along. So what happened? Where did moshing start? Most historians and old timers in the scene seem to agree that moshing was born in the late 70s in the good old US of A. Apparently, what was known as pogoing, as time went on, people would just stop jumping up and down in place and start bouncing off from side to side, making more body contact with others in the crowd. And I guess people started liking it, and eventually this became moshing as we know it. The who and where did it start in this big old country of mine is, of course, open to endless debate. But from what I gather, it seems that it was the Southern California punk scene of the late 70s that built the foundation for moshing as we know it today. There was an article I found that claims that the first mosh pit happened at a concert for the punk band The Weirdos, who I don't really even know, but it was at the Roxy in the late 70s. Okay, that's one take. And then you have journalist Stephen Blush, who in his book, American Hardcore, A Tribal History, he claims that slam dancing was born out of Southern California towns like Huntington Beach and Long Beach. Some sources say that it was started at a club in Costa Mesa, California called the Cuckoo's Nest. And it was named after the movie, of course, where punk bands like TSOL, Fear, Social Distortion, Agent Orange. In fact, Henry Rollins, for a show with Black Flag, was at that club. And the Cuckoo's Nest was this legendary club and the place to be for punk rock in Southern California. I got the goddamn Safety Dance stuck in my head.
We can go if we want to. Night is young and so am I.
But as we all know, nothing good ever lasts. And in 1981, owner Jerry Roach had to close the doors. All hell was breaking loose on an almost nightly basis. Some say it was so bad at times, even the cops were too scared to go in there and bust things up. Almost every night there was a problem. Police were always outside looking to bust anyone for the slightest damn thing. There was an incident where one kid tried to run over a couple of cops, and I think it was with their own squad car. There was constant violence in the audience almost every night. Sometimes between the bands and their fans because things got out of hand on stage, and there was little to no security. Fans were always pissed at Jerry because he wouldn't pay them much at all, because since he charged so little for admission, there wasn't much left after all the overhead, the cost of insurance, the legal battles, and it just couldn't last. And eventually, the city of Costa Mesa had had enough. They got involved and forced the place to close for good. And it's such a shame that a historic place like that isn't around anymore because people can't behave and they just ruin shit. Like I said, that's how it always goes. So now we kind of have the where of where it started, but what about the who? No, not them. Things like this always tend to start small. It wasn't like a whole punk audience at one show just collectively decided one night that beating the shit out of each other is just more fun than watching the band. But could one guy have kicked things off and gotten the crowd to follow along? Like perhaps one maniac was the guy, the first guy to be like, you know what? I'm loving this music. I got a good buzz going. I'm totally vibing, and I want to fuck somebody up right now. Well, in my digging, I found that some people credit Jim Decker from the band The Crowd for kicking things off, but I can't find much else to back that up. And from what I've seen, he denies it too.
I'll never say that I started or invented slam dancing because I've seen monkeys in the zoo running around, swinging their arms back and forth, you know.
But back to Stephen Blush's book, legend has it there was a maniac that started it all. And that man was from Huntington Beach, California, named Mike Marine. Real name, I don't know. Stephen Blush has credited him with starting the slam dancing craze in '79. And considering this guy gets the credit for that, it's surprising. I can't find shit on him. Not one picture, not a video, not an article. Like there should be a commemorative statue of this dude somewhere. Like, can anybody find out if that guy's still alive or if you happen to know him at all? Comment. And I'm just a contractor slash YouTube knucklehead, not an investigative journalist here. So the story goes, Mike would attend shows, strut around in a circle, just swinging his arms everywhere and hitting everyone within reach. And it quickly became known in the local circles as the Huntington Beach strut. And more concert goers over time started adopting it. And from what little I found on Mike Marine, I read that when asked about why he likes slam dancing, he is quoted as saying that slam dancing separates the real punks from the posers.
Words of wisdom, Lloyd. Words of wisdom.
As far as some of the other things that go on in the mosh pit, a lot of people credit Iggy Pop as the first punk and the first to do stage diving, which by the early 80s had definitely become a thing at punk shows.
There were a couple of girls, big ones. They moved up right in front of the stage and they just were laying there on their backs, making themselves very comfortable, relaxing. I thought, I'm just gonna fall forward. They'll catch me. And they moved. And my front teeth, which I've since had repaired, went straight through one of my lips.
I mean, maybe Iggy was the first artist to do it, but I actually found footage of a stage diver at a Stone show from '64. I mean, who knows what that dude's intention or motivation was? It was probably just a thing. He just decided in the moment. But like I said, no matter what you think, someone always got there first somehow, but whatever. As the '70s ended and the crazy '80s began, mosh pits were definitely becoming more prevalent at concerts for bands like Fear and Black Flag. I don't know who came up with the term slam dancing, but the term moshing seems to have originated from HR, the lead singer of the DC punk band Bad Brains. And while on the mic, he'd tell the crowd to mash it up, mash it up.
Potatoes.
But due to his accent, here's what's weird. He was born in England, but moved to America when he was a baby. His father was from Jamaica, but HR was raised in America, but apparently he had an accent. I don't know how, I'm just reporting the facts here, but anyways, he would pronounce the word mash as mosh, and it stuck. That's it. That's all. Simple as that. Shit never gets born out of some stroke of genius. It's always some stupid, happy little accident like Bob Ross used to say.
We have happy accidents.
Now, when mosh pits were becoming a staple at punk shows, not every band was supportive of it. I know Ian MacKaye of Fugazi, he wasn't a fan, and he'd call out fans sometimes from the stage and ask them to stop, but I'm sure he lost that battle. I'm not certain about specifically when the trend of moshing made its way from the punk scene to the metal scene. You can perhaps go back to the crossover bands of the mid 80s, like I mentioned before. And as time went on, these bands all wound up sharing a fan base. So I figure punk fans would go see hardcore and thrash metal shows and bring all their chaos with them, and it caught on there too. By the time the mid 80s came along, artists like Ian MacKaye were in the minority because most bands in the mid 80s on up just accepted moshing. In fact, I don't think they had much of a choice anyway, but many artists really embraced it. Bands like Exodus, they had some legendary violent mosh pits, and some bands celebrated in their song lyrics. I know SOD, they had a song called the Milano Mosh. Anthrax did their song Caught in a Mosh. But as far as songs go, to me, no two songs sum up what the price of admission gets you at a metal show better than Exodus's Toxic Waltz. Everybody's doing the toxic waltz. Get your friend in the hand and have a ball. And DRI's Thrash Hard. By the 90s, you probably couldn't go to a metal show or a punk show without someone, no matter how small the crowd, trying to start up some degree of consensual violence. Like I said earlier, though, nothing lasts forever, and clubs eventually had to start cracking down on stage diving, probably due to the high insurance costs. So I'm grateful I at least got to witness the tail end of that whole movement in my early days, but I didn't get to see much of that at club shows from the late 90s on. A lot of crowd surfing, but the fact that stage diving just invited more trouble and more injury and more conflict with security. In fact, clubs had to hire more security for venues, and it became common at every show to see just this wall of jacked up gorillas between you and the stage. I mean, most of the time they'd be there just to kind of help a crowd surfer land safely and doesn't, between the stage and the barrier so he doesn't break his neck. But on occasion, I did see a couple instances where security would chase and tackle a potential stage diver. Bands and audiences have since found other ways to have fun anyway, and the Wall of Death, that started becoming a thing, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s. At least I never got to see it in person until I think maybe the mid 2000s at a Lamb of God show. But apparently, Lou Collar, from the lead singer of the band Sick of It All, a lot of people give him credit with having created the whole Wall of Death. In fact, it was called the Braveheart at first, and it happened at a show in England, from what I read, back in 96 or 97. I think it was at the Download Festival or Donington or one of those two. And the band wanted to stand out from all the others in the lineup. And I guess that's one hell of a way to distinguish yourselves. But hey, one of the only constants in life is change. And what's interesting is that when I was going to concerts back in the 90s, most shows were a complete sausage fest, especially at the death metal shows, with the exception of maybe a couple of dudes who brought their cool girlfriends with them to stand on their shoulders while they're hanging out on the outskirts of the pit. But women were extremely scarce back then in a mosh pit. In the 2000s, I think it started to become more common to see females attending metal shows and tearing it up with the rest of the guys in there. Perhaps things are a bit more tame these days in terms of the level of violence, so that might have something to do with why you see more women in the pit now, or it could just be due to the fact that girls are just way cooler and more badass than when I was a kid. Because pits were rough, man. I remember being at Ozfest in 97, and there were fights all over during Pantera's set. I've seen a lot of fights during shows like Overkill and Clutch and Fear Factory, Machine Head, Propane. I gotta say, there was at least one fight at every metal show I went to in the 90s and 2000s, but don't get me wrong here. I don't condone this shit. I always hated people that had to make it nasty. Like looking back, yeah, it's a crazy memory and an experience to share like a war story, but I don't like seeing people get hurt, man. It's really all about having fun. But look, I mean, some people, they get every bit of what they deserve. Just have a good time and peace and love in the craziness. Those super violent days are gone, and pretty much that level of violence has gone with it. Or has it? Hey, look, I'll admit me and my fellow Gen Xers were a bunch of angry assholes when we were growing up, and millennials were probably a little bit more emo and chill, and perhaps a transitional period when we were getting older, things calmed down at metal shows for a while during the 2010s. But in the last few years, as Gen Z has grown up and started attending shows, I've kind of noticed that things they're getting a bit nasty again. Like, it's very weird to me that, like, when I see these old school dudes in their 40s and 50s still at it, going ape shit like it's 1992 in there, and they're fucking shit up with all the younger generation. It's a beautiful thing to see. It just warms my heart. I mean, if you're lucky you can still do it at that age, go for it. But it carries a lot more risk, obviously, the old battle axe. But some of the pits I've seen with younger kids nowadays, they've really been kind of a return to form. I mean, maybe not 80s level, but I've noticed things getting a little rough again. I got a friend, he's about 31, and he went to see a Paleface Swiss show in New York. And he said the mosh pit for the opening band, Nasty, was really rough, like scary rough. Now, normally when a 31-year-old tries to tell me how rough a mosh pit was, I'd be like, all right, Sonny, pull up a chair. Let me tell you how it was back in the good old days. But I value his opinion because he's a bartender at a pretty big venue. So he's gotten to witness a lot of different mosh pits for a lot of different bands. Also, got to say, much to my surprise, I've noticed stage diving slowly making a comeback at some shows here and there. And I'm glad to see younger generations picking up the torch and running with that one. As far as that goes, like, it's cool to see that they noticed the chaos of yesteryear and they want to keep that alive. The looks have changed too. I mean, it used to be like everyone at a metal show was just kind of casually dressed in just jeans and a band shirt or in full goth regalia. Now I see people coming to the shows in full cosplay. I've seen people dressed up like a 30s gangster.
I ain't one and I ain't yellow. Who said you was?
I've seen people dressed like they're at a Grateful Dead show. You wear tie-dye back in the 90s to a metal show, you need your head examined before and after the show, just for different reasons. I've seen people in the pit cosplaying as Captain America without the shield. Obviously, they're not going to let him in with that. I've seen girls dressed like Sailor Moon, running around the circle pit, singing her ass off, swinging her arms. I saw Machine Head a few Christmases ago, and some dude came dressed up in a full Santa uniform, just going nuts in his giant, sweaty red suit. Somehow in the chaos, the Santa suit wound up on Rob, the lead singer. I don't know how. People bring pool noodles and all kinds of accessories like they're at a beach party. I mean, dudes in wheelchairs, crowd surfing. I mean, anything goes now. It's so much wilder than it ever used to be. I never see much real aggression or bullying happening at shows anymore, which is good. I'm sure it still happens, but I know we as a collective, yeah, we haven't evolved all that much, I'm sure. I just haven't experienced it anywhere near like I used to. And I mean, I'm almost 50 now, so I'm okay with it. Although I will say I cannot go to a show and not at least be in the mix. I have pretty much zero interest in seeing a metal band now if I gotta be seated. I don't like raging from the comfort of a plastic chair. I'd almost rather stay home, even if I'm not in the pit, like at least being on the sidelines or something, because I crave the whole experience of it. I love the sound bath of a concert. That wall of sound out in the darkness that just wraps around me like a weighted blanket. The thump of the bass drums bouncing off my chest. The crowd compression to me is like one big hug. I really can't describe the cathartic sense that I feel and why I live for it so much, but I'm going to be doing it till I'm dead. It's like the purge for my soul. So that's pretty much everything I could excavate from the internet. But if you guys have anything to add, feel free. I'd love to learn more, especially from like the older dudes who lived it and were there. I can't find everything related to what I've been talking about here. So if you know more than I do about what and who and when or where, share your knowledge or experiences below. Subscribe and let's get this channel of mine up and running. And if I learn more details, enough to maybe make a part 2 to this, I'll do it. But I'll just say thanks for watching. This was a lot of fun to do, even though my fan says it's now 91 degrees in here and I'm dying and I've had enough. So catch you later. Till next time. Bye.